Have you ever been judged? Not for your skills, not for your character, but simply because of how you look? Have you ever walked into a room where everyone had already decided you don't belong? This is the story of a man who faced exactly that. A black man, walking into a powerful company in Denver simply looking for an opportunity. But instead of respect, he got humiliated. Instead of a chance, he got told to leave. They laughed at him. They looked down on him. They thought he was just another nobody. But what they didn't know was that the man they just kicked out would soon own everything they thought was untouchable. This is not just a story about business. This is a story about pride, prejudice, and power. And trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. But before we jump into this powerful story, if stories like this inspire you, if you love stories where the underdog rises beyond all expectations, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this one. And after you've watched this story all the way through, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever proven someone wrong just by being your true self? Don't forget to drop your story in the comments below. Now, let me take you into the world of Elijah Brooks and show you how a man they once laughed at became the name they could never forget. In the heart of Denver, where towering skyscrapers touch the clouds and powerful corporations shape the future, a man named Elijah Brooks walks into an elite firm for a job interview. He is sharp, prepared, and driven. But none of that seems to matter. To the people inside Winters & Cole, a company known for its wealth, arrogance, and exclusivity, Elijah is just another face they've already judged. Without a second thought, they humiliate him, dismiss him, and tell him to leave. But what they don't know is that Elijah Brooks is no ordinary applicant. Behind the quiet strength in his eyes is a story they never saw coming. A story of resilience born in the streets of 5 Points. A story of talent overlooked, of dreams underestimated, and of a journey fueled not by revenge, but by vision. Because sometimes life has a way of turning tables. And when Elijah Brooks returns, he does not return as a man looking for a job. He returns as the man who owns everything they thought he could never have. This is not just a story about business. It's a story about pride, prejudice, and power. It's a story about how character rises when arrogance falls. And above all, it's the story of how a janitor became a king. Disclaimer: this video is a work of fiction. All characters, names, places, and events depicted in this story are purely the product of imagination and creative storytelling. Any similarities to actual persons, living or dead, or real events are purely coincidental. This story was created with the sole purpose of delivering moral lessons, motivation, inspiration, and valuable life insights for its viewers. It is not intended to offend, criticize, or target any individual, company, or group. We hope this story inspires reflection, encourages positive thinking, and reminds us all of the importance of treating others with respect, regardless of their background or appearance. Thank you for watching. Denver's morning skyline stretched wide and bold, the Rocky Mountains sitting like quiet sentries behind a city pulsing with ambition. Downtown buzzed with its usual weekday rhythm. Business people hurried along the sidewalks in expensive shoes. Cars hummed beneath traffic lights. In the heart of it all, towering above the street like a glass and steel monument to wealth, stood the headquarters of Winters & Cole Consulting. Inside the building, every corner gleamed with precision. Marble floors, glass walls, clean lines, and colder smiles. It was the kind of place that wore its exclusivity like cologne. And for many who passed through those glass doors, it sent a clear message: only a certain kind of person belonged here. Elijah Brooks stepped through those very doors that morning. His arrival caused an almost imperceptible ripple at the front desk. The young receptionist, a woman named Claire, caught a glance at him and hesitated, just a beat longer than she might have for anyone else. Elijah noticed. He always noticed. He was dressed sharp but not loud. Tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, no flashy jewelry, a simple leather briefcase in one hand. His skin was a deep, smooth brown, his fade sharp and clean, his expression unreadable but calm. He walked with the ease of someone who knew exactly who he was and had nothing to prove. "Good morning," Elijah said, his voice even and polite. Claire blinked. She recovered quickly like a trained professional. Good morning. Can I help you?" "Elijah Brooks. Here to see Richard Cole." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The name caught her off guard. She double-checked her monitor, then gave a small, confused nod. "One moment, please." As she made the call to upstairs, Elijah stood quietly looking around the lobby. Polished awards lined the walls. Photographs of past partners, almost exclusively white men, smiled down from their gilded frames. The company's slogan was etched into the stone behind the receptionist. Excellence above all. Elijah allowed himself a small smile. Claire hung up the phone. "Mr. Cole will see you on the 23rd floor," she said, forcing a neutral expression. But something in her tone had already changed. Like she could not quite hide the disbelief lingering just beneath the surface. Elijah nodded his thanks. The elevator ride was long, smooth, and silent. His reflection stared back at him from the mirrored walls. Unbothered. Patient. When the doors opened, a different kind of reception awaited him. Richard Cole himself stood at the end of the long, open floor. He was exactly as Elijah had expected. Late 50s. Silver hair. Expensive tailored suit, one that tried hard to hold together old money charm with quiet arrogance. His blue eyes swept Elijah from head to toe like he was appraising a used car someone had mistakenly driven into a dealership like this. "Mr. Brooks," Richard said, his smile thin as paper. "Well, this is unexpected." Elijah extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Cole." Richard hesitated just a beat too long before shaking it. "Come this way." He led Elijah into a large office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Denver skyline. The kind of office built to make visitors feel small. But Elijah did not sit until he was told. Richard did not offer. Instead, he sank into his own chair and gestured loosely, like Elijah was interrupting a very important day. "I have to admit, Mr. Brooks, I was surprised when I saw your application. I don't recall seeing many applicants with your background in this firm." Elijah said nothing. He simply watched. Richard leaned back. "Tell me, Mr. Brooks, what exactly made you think Winters & Cole was the right place for someone like you?" There it was. The words hung in the air, heavy but sharpened like a knife. "Not someone with your skills. Not someone with your experience. Someone like you." Elijah let the silence stretch. "Come." Measured. Then he replied. "Because I believe real talent rises, regardless of where it comes from." Richard laughed. Not kindly. "Well, that's a charming philosophy," he said, shaking his head. "But this firm operates at a different level, Mr. Brooks. Our clients expect a certain pedigree, a certain look. We're not in the business of charity here." Elijah's face remained unchanged. Richard glanced briefly at the resume on his desk, still unopened. "I think we can end this here," Richard said, standing. "Frankly, I'm doing you a favor. This isn't the place for someone with your background. Might want to try somewhere a little less demanding. Perhaps something a bit more local." He smiled. Dismissive. Final. Elijah stood as well, closing his briefcase calmly. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Cole." And then, with the same quiet grace he had entered with, Elijah Brooks turned and walked out. He left behind the office, the view, the prejudice, and a man who had just made the biggest mistake of his career. Because this was not the end of Elijah's story. It was only the beginning. The streets of Denver were alive beneath the afternoon sun. The light reflected off glass towers, the traffic hummed steadily, and for most people, it was just another ordinary day. But for Elijah Brooks, everything had already changed. He walked slowly through downtown, blending easily into the stream of busy professionals. The world moved around him without knowing the storm that was quietly building in his wake. He stopped at a small coffee shop on Larimer Street, one of his favorites. A place that had once been part of old Denver before the money came pouring in and changed everything. The owner, a gray-bearded man named Mr. Davis, nodded when he saw him. "Elijah," Mr. Davis said warmly. "Been a minute." Elijah smiled. It was genuine this time. "Had a meeting nearby," Elijah said. "Figured I'd stop in for the real coffee." Mr. Davis laughed, shaking his head. "Still running circles around these downtown folks, I see." Elijah shrugged. "Something like that." He ordered his usual and sat by the window, his briefcase resting beside him. For a while he simply watched the city move. Young professionals in sleek suits, tech bros on scooters, tourists snapping pictures, homeless men sitting invisible on the corner. Two Denvers living on top of each other. He pulled out his phone and opened an email thread. Subject line, "Winters & Cole, acquisition complete." The details were all there. The final signatures, the wire transfers, the controlling shares. Elijah Brooks was no job applicant. He was the new owner. And in less than an hour, the news would break. A few blocks away, inside the glass fortress of Winters & Cole, Richard Cole was feeling particularly pleased with himself. He had just finished telling the story of Elijah's interview to two of his senior partners, both laughing a little too hard at his imitation of Elijah's calm voice. "Honestly," Richard said, shaking his head, "I don't know what these people are thinking. Just waltzing in here like they belong." The words hung in the room, heavy with their real meaning. The men in the room nodded in agreement, their laughter low and knowing. Then the door opened. It was Claire, the receptionist, looking pale. "Mr. Cole," she said cautiously, "you might want to see this." Richard frowned. She handed him her tablet. On the screen was a breaking news alert from a major financial outlet. Elijah Brooks acquires Winters & Cole Consulting in historic deal. Denver-based investor and entrepreneur Elijah Brooks has finalized his acquisition of Winters & Cole Consulting, marking one of the most surprising takeovers in recent local business history. Richard stared. The words blurred for a moment like they refused to register. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. But even as the question left his mouth, his office phone began to ring. Then his cell phone. Then the landline of the conference room. What was happening? The ripple effect was instant. Partners stepping out of their offices. Employees whispering in the hallways. Emails flooding inboxes. The name Elijah Brooks was on everyone's lips. Across town, Elijah finished his coffee calmly. His phone buzzed with messages. Congratulations from other executives. Investors confirming next steps. But it was a simple message from his assistant, Nina, that made him smile. "All set. Ready when you are." Elijah stood, leaving a generous tip for Mr. Davis, and stepped back out into the Denver sunlight. As he walked toward his car, he thought about his mother's words from long ago. Words spoken in a tiny apartment in 5 Points when he was just a boy dreaming too big for his surroundings. "Remember, Eli, they can laugh, they can doubt you, but they cannot stop what they cannot see coming." Today they had seen nothing coming, but they were about to feel all of it. Back at Winters & Cole, Richard Cole paced his office like a man lost at sea. "How is this possible?" he barked into his phone. "Who approved this? Why was I not told?" His assistant stammered on the other end, but Richard barely heard her. Then came the final blow. The elevator dinged. Footsteps crossed the marble floor. Elijah Brooks had returned. But this time he was not here for a job. He was here for everything. The atmosphere inside Winters & Cole was unlike anything the staff had ever experienced. An unfamiliar tension clung to the walls like fog. Employees hovered near their desks, murmuring quietly, their curious eyes drawn to the lobby. Word spread faster than wildfire. "Elijah Brooks is here." He bought the whole company? Wait, the same guy Richard kicked out this morning? It felt like something out of a movie. The man they had dismissed, laughed at, and humiliated was now walking through their glass doors with the authority of an owner. Elijah's entrance was deliberate. Calm. Measured. No anger. No bravado. Just the kind of quiet confidence that made people straighten their backs without knowing why. He wore the same suit from earlier, the one Richard Cole had mocked, but now it looked different. Not because the suit had changed, but because everything else had. His assistant, Nina, walked slightly behind him, tablet in hand, looking unbothered by the staring faces lining the hallway. The receptionist, Claire, stood frozen at her desk. "Elijah," she breathed, half whisper, half shock. He paused briefly. "Good to see you again, Claire," Elijah said, his voice warm but steady. "Busy morning, huh?" She nodded, speechless. Without breaking stride, Elijah and Nina moved toward the executive floor. Security didn't stop him. Nobody dared. Meanwhile, in his office, Richard Cole was unraveling. He had locked the door, trying desperately to call anyone who could explain the situation. Board members, lawyers, his contacts in high places. But every answer was the same. It's done. The purchase was legitimate. The contracts airtight. The controlling shares were no longer his. Winters & Cole now belonged to Elijah Brooks. Richard stood at the window looking down at the Denver skyline, a city he thought he ruled. Now, all he saw was a reflection of his own arrogance staring back at him. Then came the knock. Sure. Intentional. He didn't answer. The door opened anyway. Nina stepped in first, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole," she said with polite finality. "Mr. Brooks will see you now." Behind her, Elijah entered. Richard turned slowly, the blood draining from his face. The two men faced each other again, but this time the entire balance of power had shifted. No longer was Elijah the man standing hat in hand. Now he was the man in control. "Richard," Elijah said evenly. "Let's talk." The silence stretched for a beat too long. Richard forced a bitter laugh, trying to recover what little dignity he had left. Well, I have to admit, Brooks, this is quite the stunt. Elijah raised an eyebrow. A stunt? He repeated softly. Buying an entire firm just to have this conversation. Now that would be petty. He paused. But this is business. Richard's jaw tightened. Business? You think you belong in this world? Elijah studied him for a long moment. See, that's the thing about this world, Elijah replied. It changes whether you're ready or not. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You judged me the second I walked through your door. You didn't see talent, or potential, or value. You saw what you wanted to see. Richard sneered. And what now? You think you can just come in here, wave your money around, and change things? Elijah smiled faintly. I didn't come here to change things, Richard. I came here to own them. Outside the office, staff members lingered near their desks, pretending to work while stealing glances toward the executive floor. Nobody knew exactly what was being said behind those closed doors. But they all knew this much. Today marked the end of the old Winters and Cole, and the beginning of something entirely new. Inside the office, Elijah turned to leave. Oh, and Richard, Elijah added, glancing back. There's a board meeting in an hour. Mandatory attendance. You should probably start preparing for that. Richard's face darkened. Elijah stepped into the hallway, Nina close behind. As they walked past the stunned staff, Elijah offered a simple nod, not of arrogance but of acknowledgement. His time had come. Not because he forced his way in, but because the world always makes room, eventually, for those who cannot be ignored. The boardroom of Winters and Cole had always been a symbol of power. Its long polished table, framed by towering windows overlooking downtown Denver, had witnessed countless high-stakes decisions. But today that room felt smaller, tighter, claustrophobic. Every seat was filled. Partners, senior managers, department heads. Even longtime employees who had never once been invited to a board meeting found themselves sitting nervously along the walls, unsure of what to expect. At the head of the table sat Elijah Brooks, composed. So, on the surface it seemed like he barely moved at all. But his presence filled the entire room. Across from him, Richard Cole sat stiffly, his face a carefully constructed mask of indifference. But beneath the table, his foot tapped anxiously against the floor. The murmur of low conversation died instantly as Elijah began to speak. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Elijah started, his voice calm, deliberate. As you've probably heard by now, there has been a change in ownership. He let that hang in the air just long enough to let reality settle in fully. My name is Elijah Brooks. As of this morning, I am the majority shareholder of Winters and Cole. He paused, letting his gaze drift around the room, meeting the eyes of every person there. I'm aware that some of you may have questions, concerns, maybe even doubts. That's fair. But let me be clear about something. His voice hardened ever so slightly. The era of overlooking talent because of background, appearance, or anything else that has nothing to do with skill is over. A ripple moved through the room. Some looked surprised. Others looked relieved. But Richard Cole, he looked furious. Richard leaned forward, his voice laced with venom. You really think you can waltz in here and run this company? This isn't a charity, Brooks. It's not the streets. It's not some motivational story for social media. A low, uncomfortable shift swept across the boardroom. But Elijah didn't flinch. You're right, Elijah replied evenly. This isn't the streets. It's a business. And unlike you, Richard, I understand that business is about evolution. He leaned forward slightly. And right now this company has a choice. It can evolve, or it can go extinct. The room was silent. Elijah clicked a small remote. Behind him, the presentation screen lit up. Slide after slide displayed financial reports, growth opportunities, strategic partnerships, and market analysis, all backed by Elijah's own investment firm. Facts, numbers, vision. It was irrefutable. This firm has been bleeding talent for years, Elijah continued. Not because there weren't qualified people, but because leadership failed to see beyond their own biases. More shifting in seats. A few board members exchanged glances, suddenly remembering promising young hires who had mysteriously left over the years. I didn't buy this company out of spite, Elijah said quietly. I bought it because I see what it could become. Then he turned his attention directly to Richard. Which brings us to you. Richard stiffened. Effective immediately, Elijah announced, Richard Cole would be stepping down from all operational roles. He would remain on the board, purely ceremonial, with zero decision-making power. The final blow was surgical, clean, professional, devastating. Richard's face twisted into a sneer. "You think this is the end of me, Brooks?" Elijah's response was simple. "I think this is the end of who you were here." The meeting continued, but the message had already been delivered. This was no longer the world Richard Cole had controlled. This was Elijah Brooks' house now. A house built not on fear or exclusion, but on merit. As the boardroom emptied, employees moved with hushed respect around Elijah. Some offered nervous smiles. Others nodded quietly. But one thing was certain. In less than a day, everything about Winters and Cole had changed. Not because of revenge. Not because of noise. But because true power moves differently. True power speaks when it has something worth saying. And Elijah Brooks had spoken loud enough for all of Denver to hear. The news of Elijah Brooks' stunning takeover spread through Denver like wildfire. Corporate circles buzzed with speculation, disbelief, and admiration. Winters and Cole had been considered untouchable, a fortress built on decades of tradition and privilege. But overnight, the unthinkable had happened. And at the heart of it all stood Elijah. Denver's financial district had never seen anything like him. Inside his newly assigned office, the same one that once belonged to Richard Cole, Elijah sat at the massive glass desk overlooking the city skyline. Yet, unlike Richard's former shrine of ego, the office was sparse. No heavy portraits. No displays of dominance. Just clean lines, sunlight pouring in, and a quiet sense of focus. On his desk lay a single framed photo. His mother, standing outside their old apartment building in 5 Points, smiling like the sun. That smile had carried him through countless storms. A soft knock at the door broke his thoughts. "Come in," Elijah said without looking up. Was Vanessa Liu. "Mr. Brooks," she said cautiously, "there's been a line forming in reception since this morning." Elijah looked up, confused. "A line?" Vanessa nodded, half amused, half overwhelmed. "Employees. All of them wanting to meet you. Some just to shake your hand. Some just want to say thank you." Elijah leaned back, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Clear my schedule," he said. "I'll meet them all." One by one they came. Janitors, interns, analysts, designers. People the old leadership had never even learned by name. Some brought nervous energy. Others brought stories of being overlooked, unheard, and doubted. And to every single person Elijah listened. Really listened. He asked about their ideas, their challenges, their dreams. It wasn't just polite interest, it was strategy. Because Elijah understood something Richard Cole never had. The soul of a company wasn't found in spreadsheets or corner offices. It was in its people. Meanwhile, outside the walls of Winters and Cole, Denver's elite were scrambling. Other CEOs and founders met behind closed doors, analyzing what Elijah's move meant for them. Media outlets raced to cover the story. The Denver Chronicle headlined it bluntly, "From rejected to ruler, Elijah Brooks shakes up Denver's old guard." Local radio shows debated every detail of his takeover. "He came from nothing," one host said, "and now he owns one of the city's most prestigious firms. It's inspiring, but it's a warning shot too." Another added, "You can't treat people like they don't belong anymore." Elijah Brooks just proved that. But not everyone celebrated. In a private club high above Larimer Street, Richard Cole sat nursing a drink, bitterness twisting inside him. Beside him sat Leonard Price, another old-school executive from a rival firm. "You won this round, Brooks," Richard muttered under his breath, staring out at the city lights. "But Denver belongs to men like me." Leonard gave a thin smile. "For now," he replied. But deep down they both knew the truth. The ground beneath their feet was shifting. And Elijah Brooks was the reason. Back at Winters and Cole, Elijah stood by his office window as the sun dipped behind the Rockies. His phone buzzed. A message from Jonah, the friend who had helped him broker the takeover. "Dinner tomorrow night? Got something you'll want to hear." Elijah replied simply, "Let's talk." Because all of this, was only the beginning. There were bigger moves to make. Old systems to dismantle. New legacies to build. And Elijah Brooks had never been one to stop at victory. He was here to change the game entirely. The next evening, Denver's night air hummed with quiet energy. The city glowed beneath the early spring sky, its streets alive with stories, some old, some just beginning. Inside an intimate restaurant tucked away in Rhino District, Elijah sat across from Jonah Mercer, his longtime friend, mentor, and the man responsible for helping orchestrate one of the most shocking acquisitions Denver had ever seen. Jonah was relaxed, dressed casually, sipping whiskey like a man who'd seen it all. But Elijah could feel it, That pulse of unspoken energy between them. This wasn't just dinner. Jonah had something. You've rattled their cages, Jonah said with a grin. You should see some of these old money guys scrambling. It's like watching dinosaurs look up at the asteroid. Elijah smirked. I didn't come here to cause chaos, Jonah. Jonah chuckled. You didn't have to. All you did was walk in the front door. Then Jonah leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. But I didn't call you here just to pat you on the back. Elijah nodded. I figured. Jonah pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a document, a confidential internal memo from one of Denver's largest private equity firms. The subject line read, Potential Takeover Defense Strategies Brooks Risk Factor. Elijah's jaw tightened. They're coming together, Jonah explained. Coal price, probably others. They're scared. Not just of you, but of what you represent. Elijah read further. Whispers of firms pooling resources. Potential smear campaigns. Private investigations. They think you're a threat to their entire system, Jonah added. And they're right. Elijah leaned back, letting the weight of it all settle. This wasn't just about Winters and Cole anymore. This was about control. About gatekeeping. About every door that had ever been slammed in the face of people like him. But Elijah Brooks had built his life on turning barriers into blueprints. They're going to try to push me out, Elijah said quietly. Jonah smiled without humor. Probably. But that's not the real play here. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Jonah tapped the screen again, opening another file. This one was different. A list of struggling mid-sized firms across Denver. Quiet, talented companies. Overlooked. Undervalued. Waiting for someone with vision to believe in them. You want to win, Elijah? Jonah asked. Don't just hold on to Winters and Cole. Build something bigger. Bring others with you. Change the landscape so thoroughly, they can't keep up. Elijah stared at the names. Some of them he recognized. Some he didn't. But all of them had something in common. Potential. Real, raw, untapped potential. His mind began to race. Later that night, Elijah walked alone through 5 Points. His old neighborhood. The place where it all started. The streets were quieter now, gentrified in places, but still holding pockets of soul that couldn't be paved over. He passed the corner store where he used to sweep floors after school. He passed the basketball courts where dreams were traded like currency. Then he stopped in front of the old building where his mother once worked double shifts just to make rent. The roots were still here. And so was he. Back in his new office the next morning, Elijah called Vanessa in. Clear my next few weeks, he said. She looked surprised. All of it. He nodded. I'm going hunting. For what? She asked carefully. Elijah's eyes were steady. For builders. For dreamers. For every overlooked genius they told couldn't belong in rooms like this. He paused. And then I'm going to make those rooms ours. Denver was changing. The skyline would change. The boardrooms would change. And Elijah Brooks, the man they once told to leave the lobby, was about to rewrite every rule they thought was permanent. Not with revenge. Not with noise. But with undeniable vision. Weeks passed, but the echoes of Elijah Brooks' takeover still reverberated across Denver. Yet while the city's elite were busy whispering and plotting behind closed doors, Elijah was on the move, quietly, relentlessly, methodically building something no one saw coming. He wasn't just sitting on the throne of Winters and Cole. He was building an entirely new kingdom. True to his word, Elijah spent the next several weeks outside the walls of his sleek new office. No grand speeches. No press conferences. Just boots on the ground meeting people where they were. Small design firms tucked away in alley studios. Tech startups grinding away in modest co-working spaces. Family-owned businesses barely holding on in an economy designed to favor giants. Elijah listened. He asked questions. And most importantly, he offered something no one else had ever given them: belief. Not charity. Not pity. Investment. Real partnership. Real respect. One afternoon, he sat in a sunlit warehouse in the Santa Fe Arts District, surrounded by young architects and designers whose ideas could reshape Denver's future skyline. We don't have the resources to bid for big projects, one of them admitted. We've pitched before. They won't even look at us. Elijah leaned forward. Let me guess, he said with a knowing smile. They told you you're talented, but not the right fit? Heads nodded. He shook his head slowly. Forget fit, he said. We're going to build things so good, so bold, so undeniable. They won't have a choice but to notice. And that became the pulse of Elijah's movement. Not loud, not angry, but quietly revolutionary. Meanwhile, the old guard watched with growing unease. Inside Leonard Price's office, a group of corporate leaders huddled together over charts, reports, and strategy documents. "He's not playing their game," one of them muttered. "He's rewriting the rules." Richard Cole, sitting in the corner with a cold glare, spoke flatly. "He's bleeding into every market sector that used to be ours. Every firm we overlooked, every talent we ignored. He's giving them power. And if we don't stop him soon," Leonard added, "Denver won't look like the Denver we built." Silence hung in the room, because deep down they all knew. That was exactly the point. Back at Winters and Cole, the culture was already changing. Employees once invisible now had seats at real tables. New policies dismantled the old hierarchies. Innovation labs sprung up on every floor, led not by seniority but by merit. Elijah moved through it all with quiet confidence, unbothered by the growing resistance outside. To him, resistance was proof of progress. But as every visionary knows, not everyone applauds change. One evening, as Elijah exited a meeting in Lodo, a car pulled up slowly beside him. A tinted window rolled down. Richard Cole sat in the back seat, his expression sharp and cold. "For someone who claims he's here to build," Richard said, "you sure are burning a lot of bridges." Elijah didn't flinch. "Bridges to where?" he asked calmly. "Back to a world built on exclusion?" Richard sneered. "You don't belong here, Brooks. No matter how much money you throw around." Elijah stared at him, not with anger but with clarity. "I didn't come here to belong," he replied. "I came here to lead." And with that he turned away. Because the future didn't wait for permission. Later that night, overlooking the Denver skyline from his apartment, Elijah stood quietly as the city glimmered below. A city at the crossroads of old power and new vision. A city ready for something different. His phone buzzed. A message from Jonah. "They're calling you the architect now." Elijah smiled faintly. Fitting. Because he wasn't just building a company. He was building a future. 7 moral lessons from the story of Elijah Brooks. The story of Elijah Brooks is more than just a tale of power, revenge, or corporate conquest. Beneath every sharp line of dialogue and dramatic boardroom scene lies something far more valuable. Lessons about life, leadership, and the quiet strength of character. These are not just lessons for entrepreneurs or business leaders. These are lessons for anyone walking through doors that were never built with them in mind. Let us reflect on them one by one. 1. Never let someone else define your worth. Elijah's journey began the moment he stepped into that lobby at Winters and Cole. The moment Charles Whitford looked him up and down and saw only skin color and stereotypes. But Elijah didn't argue. He didn't beg. He didn't waste energy trying to convince someone blind to his value. Instead, he let his actions speak louder than their assumptions. The world is full of people quick to judge and slow to understand. But the greatest power you hold is knowing exactly who you are, even when no one else sees it yet. 2. Success built on character will always outlast success built on ego. Charles Whitford had power. Leonard Price had power. Richard Cole had power. But they all built their empires on exclusion, arrogance, and control. Elijah Brooks built his on vision, respect, and inclusion. And when the storms came, only one foundation remained unshaken. True success is not measured by the size of a company or the luxury of an office. It's measured by how you treat people when you no longer need them. 3. Talent without opportunity is a story waiting to happen. Throughout Denver, Elijah found architects, designers, coders, creators, people with brilliance in their hands but locked out of the rooms that mattered. He didn't just give them charity. He gave them access. Because talent is everywhere. Opportunity is not. Real leaders look for overlooked genius, not polished resumes. Real change happens when doors are opened, not guarded. 4. Revenge is temporary. Vision is forever. Elijah could have crushed Winters and Cole out of spite. He could have humiliated Charles Whitford publicly. But his game was never about revenge. It was about building something larger than his pain. Revenge satisfies the ego. Vision satisfies the soul. Elijah understood the difference. That's why his story isn't about payback. It's about purpose. 5. The most powerful room is the one you create for others. Elijah didn't want to just sit at their table. He wanted to build new tables. He wanted rooms where people didn't have to change who they were to be accepted. Where their ideas mattered more than their pedigree. Where dreams weren't confined by zip codes or skin color. Real power is not in being the only one who made it. Real power is creating a world where others can too. 6. Stay rooted no matter how high you rise. Despite his wealth, his status, and his influence, Elijah never forgot 5 points. He never forgot the broom he once pushed across a convenience store floor. He never forgot his mother's struggle. In a world that tries to pull you further from where you began, Elijah stayed rooted. Because roots remind you of what really matters. And roots keep you steady when success tries to make you forget. 7. Leadership is not about control. It's about stewardship. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Elijah Brooks is simple. Leadership is service. Not domination. Not fear. But stewardship. He listened more than he spoke. He invested more than he extracted. He built bridges instead of walls. And in doing so, he left behind something far more valuable than just a business empire. He left a blueprint for others to follow. In the end, Elijah Brooks' story is not just about breaking barriers. It's about redefining what power looks like. It's about proving that kindness and strength are not opposites, that humility is not weakness, and that when you move through life with vision, character, and love for community, there is no system built strong enough to hold you back forever. This is the legacy of Elijah Brooks. And these are the lessons we carry forward. And that was the incredible story of Elijah Brooks. A powerful reminder that sometimes in life, the people others look down on are the very same people destined to rise the highest. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this video until the end. I truly hope this story has inspired you, motivated you, or at the very least, reminded you never to let anyone else define your worth. Because your value isn't based on where you come from, but on who you choose to become. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel so you never miss other inspiring stories like this one. And hey, there are many more powerful stories waiting for you right here on this channel. Feel free to check them out. I'm sure you'll find something that speaks directly to your heart. Once again, thank you for your time, thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next story. Take care and keep believing in yourself.